Hi everybody, it's Cynthia Kane, and welcome to our second video tutorial for UL100ZB, Research Skills, Information and Technology for our week of October 14th. In this one, we're going to be covering the second pillar of information literacy, and this is the second chapter in your textbook as well, and this is the pillar of scope. Scope means knowing what is available out there. So part of what we're going to be doing in this tutorial is learning about how to find information and actually how to identify which types of information might best meet your particular need, depending upon the topic that you're doing. We're also going to be looking at available search tools and why we might actually go to those. Something else that we're going to be covering in this tutorial is the concept of creating search statements from keywords from your topic. And this will make a little bit more sense as we go through this tutorial. Chapter 2 of our textbook goes through information formats and their characteristics. Now, this is something that I actually can identify with because I was in school and in college over 30 years ago. And when I was in school and I was doing my research for papers and for projects, this was actually the hierarchy that I used when I was looking for information and doing research. I might start with the current newspaper, which was in print at that time. I might go to government documents to find different types of United States or state government information, but more likely I went to scholarly journals, again in print and in paper, to find out what had been printed or what had been researched in a more professional format about my topic. And then I would also then go to print books and look at the index or the table of contents to find a little bit more in-depth information. Again, this is more of a traditional hierarchy. I do believe, as we mentioned in our first tutorial on Identify, that social media has completely upended this particular hierarchy. I mentioned in our first tutorial that we tend to get a lot of our news now sort of pushed at us through social media before we find out anything else. And then it's up to us to go do additional research or additional digging to find out if that news actually is true, if it's valid or not. And that can be a little bit of a challenge. I don't know whether social media actually does fit in that hierarchy. I do think it has changed completely the way that we might approach the way that we do research. One thing that hopefully has not changed that much, though, is something called the information life cycle. And this is also from chapter 2 of our textbook on pages 17 and 18. Regardless of social media or other types of technology, we do tend to follow an information life cycle like this. So in other words, somebody actually has to create an idea. Somebody has to come up with an idea. That idea then might be presented through news outlets. In terms of more scholarly information, we actually might have an idea that's presented and refined through poster sessions or presentations at scholarly conferences. And some of you might be familiar with those, maybe different professional associations. That idea then can be refined through publishing in scholarly journals or critical reviews of that idea in print or online. In other words, the idea is actually being formulated and then kind of made in a more formal way by publishing in scholarly journals. And finally, books can still provide deeper thinking about that original idea. Of course, our books can be online now as well as in print, but a book is still going to provide a little bit more of an in-depth critical perspective about an idea, so you can think about that a little bit more. And then new ideas may flow from that book, and we'll start that information life cycle all over again. We're going to have some fun with the information life cycle by looking at it in another way. You might have heard this. This is certainly something that tends to go around and around as an old wives' tale or folklore. Someone once told me that duct tape can be used to remove warts from one's skin. Is that true? Does it work? So we're going to apply this concept and this idea to the information life cycle that we just looked at. So whoever thought of using duct tape for wart removal? Somebody had to come up with this idea. Maybe they were just desperate at some point, but somebody had to actually create that idea. So it got created. Then the idea wound up being presented in some way. More than likely, with this particular one, duct tape for wart removal, I have a feeling that probably it was passed on maybe throughout the decades and throughout the years to different people through word of mouth. Hey, did you know that this could work? I have a cousin, or my wife's friend tried this and it actually worked. It could also have been passed along as folk medicine, medicine that isn't really that professional, but people might practice in the home and maybe it worked. So it had to be presented in some way. Well, at some point, believe it or not, this idea really did get refined. And it was refined through perhaps lab experiments with human subjects, maybe trying duct tape, trying different types of duct tape, different types of warts, and seeing what happened. And believe it or not, we're going to look at this in a little bit. Somebody actually published some scholarly journal articles in medical journals about using duct tape. And we're going to look at this, as I said, in a minute as well. That deeper thinking about the idea then could actually appear in something like medical books that talk about treating warts, or it could have appeared, and I'm sure that it does appear, in books that have been written about the histories of folk medicine, sort of folklore, including using duct tape. So you see how this actually worked. It's kind of a silly idea, but it actually does illustrate quite nicely the way the information life cycle can work in terms of an idea. So we're going to go back to our topic. You remember in our Identify tutorial that we created a concept map or a mind map using Bubble Us. And one thing that we did was look at a topic, and then we were identifying what sources would help us find more information about the topic. So where could I go find more sources to find information about whether or not duct tape is useful for wart removal? I would probably still want to start with a library catalog from an academic library or from a public library, because a library catalog, this is a definition from our textbook, is indeed a database that will lead me to items located in the library as well as the items to which the library has access. Our library catalog is actually called a discovery search. We're going to look at this in just a moment as well. Our discovery search actually will lead you to books in our library, but more than that, it will lead you to articles. It will lead you to other sources of information that might be owned by our library or might be available from other libraries. Now, the thing on the discovery search is that it can get pretty overwhelming to use. It's a good place to start, but it also can give you back so many results about a topic that you can just feel very overwhelmed. And we're going to teach you how to filter those searches as well. Other resources for duct tape and wart removal. Well, again, remember in our Identify tutorial, when we did Bubble Us, I was identifying the fact that I might want some psychological journal articles, or I might want some medical journals or medical magazines. I could use a library database, and probably a lot of you have used databases to find magazine articles and journal articles. Not all of those are available immediately in full text, but many are. I could find maybe a subject-specific medical database and look up duct tape and wart removal and find medical journal articles. So that could be a good, reliable source of information. I could always do Google, and I could always do Google Scholar as well to try to find information that might be freely available online, but I'm not quite sure how reliable that might be. That's one of the differences between library databases and Google. Somebody has gone through library databases and has actually curated that information. In other words, they've helped determine that what you're finding in a database from magazines or journals or books is reliable and credible. And that's why we encourage you to start with the library. I could definitely do a post on social media. Hey, has anybody out there actually used duct tape for wart removal, and does it work? Is that credible? Maybe and maybe not. It certainly is one source of information. Personal communications kind of tie into social media. Again, is anybody an expert in this area, or has anybody ever tried this way of removing warts, and did it work or not? So there's a lot of different ways that you can find information about a topic. It just depends upon how credible and reliable that you would want your sources to be, and you certainly want them to be that way. So when we are working with a topic on scoping out the topic, we also want to do something such as identifying key words. Now, keywords are actually the major words in your topic that you are going to use to actually search for information. There's a big hint here. You can take verbs that are in your topic and you can convert them into nouns, and you can actually use those as keywords. Your keywords actually want to be more nouns. You don't really want verbs in that. So duct tape, very obvious keyword. Warts, yeah. Wart removal, yes. So you see that I took the word remove and I changed that to the noun of removal for wart removal. That's what I want. I could use hand or skin. Rather than using the word true, I might want to use the word truth, maybe truth or fiction. Rather than using the phrase, does it work, I might want to use again a noun such as effects, treatment, something like that. So you see, again, it didn't take me that long to really start generating some keywords, but that's going to save me so much time in the long run when I actually want to start searching for information. Our chapter also mentions three key concepts known as and, or, not. This is something you're going to be using when you create something called a search statement for information. You'll be asked to do this later on in some of your learning assessments, so this is a really key thing to know about. The word and narrows a search. So if I want information from a database about cats and dogs, the shaded area here represents the results that I am going to get. I'm not going to get just cats. I'm also not going to get just dogs. I'm going to get any search results that mention the words cats and dogs in that same search for information. So and narrows the search. Or, in contrast, will broaden the search. In this case, I might want to find books or articles that talk about either cats or dogs. So whatever is shaded here, I'm also going to get that. I would actually get here any articles or any books that would mention both cats and dogs, but I'm also going to get articles or other items that mention just cats, and also those that mention just dogs. So or broadens the search. Or is a very good word to use for synonyms. So if I wanted treatment or effects, kind of going back to that duct tape and wart removal, I could use the word or. Not is actually a word that I don't use very much because the word not is rather powerful. The word not is used if there is a concept or a term or a word that you absolutely do not want to have included in your search. So this is an example of a search for articles or for books in a database in which I want just cats. I don't want any mention of dogs, so I could type cats, not dogs. And in this case, the overlapping area that might mention both cats and dogs, that overlapping area will also be eliminated from my search. That's why not is a very powerful word. It's going to eliminate things that you don't want in your search, but if you do that, you actually might wind up eliminating some potentially useful results. So use that one with caution. I would rather use the word and the word or when I'm creating something called a search statement. So this is what a search statement actually means. A search statement is actually the statement that you're going to type into a database or into Google for that matter to help you find information on that topic. So a search statement is not just a long sentence. That doesn't work. A search statement will take your keywords and then it will use the words and, or not if you want that. So these are sample search statements coming from my original topic. I could do duct tape and wart removal. Duct tape and, remember the word or, warts or wart removal or wart treatment. Notice that I put these words in parentheses. The reason I did that is that this kind of goes back to your knowledge of algebra. You might remember when you were solving problems in math, whatever happened to be within the parentheses wound up being solved first, and then that was combined with whatever was outside the parentheses. This is actually the same concept in this type of searching with a search statement in a database. So I would get results mentioning warts or wart removal or wart treatment, and then those search results would be combined with the word duct tape, with the word and. I could do duct tape and wart removal and medical, and I could also do duct tape and warts or wart removal and theory or truth. So let's see how this looks. So I'm starting with a new tab in Google Chrome, and I'm actually going to go to the library's webpage, William Allen White Library. The fastest way to do this is to go to library.emporia.edu, and you'll be doing this for some future learning assessments. Now remember I mentioned that we have a tab called the Discovery Search, and that's what serves as our library catalog. If I started with the Discovery Search first, I could type in duct tape and wart removal. That is my search statement. So if we ask you to create a search statement, this is what we're talking about. And we'll click on search. Now remember I mentioned that the Discovery Search goes out and searches not only the items that are owned by our library, it's going to search both books and journal articles. And you notice I get kind of funny results. The agony and the eczema. That's kind of an interesting one. This is actually an article, and you can see that the PDF full text would be available. Part of scope is also looking for access. So sometimes you will have databases or discovery searches that will have the complete text available online of articles or electronic books, ebooks. And I'm kind of getting some different things here. This one says duct tape is ineffective for warts in children. This one says duct tape removes warts. Different perspectives. I'm going to have to do more research to find out where my research might be differing or where those results might be differing if I really want to find a good conclusion. Now, part of scope as well is also thinking about how you can refine the results of your search. So I have a lot right here. I actually have over 1,700. The discovery search that we have at our library will default to ESU has it. I may only want the books in print for this search that we actually own. Notice I didn't find anything, so I'm going to have to change my search a little bit. So we'll click on back. Well, I'm kind of curious. I wonder if we have any electronic books or ebooks. Now that's very interesting because it looks like that we do. It looks like we have an ebook that's called The Essential Guide to Primary Care Procedures. So that's a health-related book. Head and neck surgery. So there are some things there that might be potentially useful. We're going to go up here and go back to home. And we're actually going to go back to the library. That's how you can go back to the library, by the way, if you're just at the ESU main page. Now, I mentioned that you can also look at databases that are a little bit more subject specific. So let's go to databases. And these are, again, are the ones that are provided by our library. You can limit your search, again, thinking about scope, to different subject areas. So let's go to medicine and health. And I'm going to go to one that's called Health Source Nursing Academic Edition. And I'm going to try my search again of duct tape and wart removal. Now this may or may not work in this database. I got exactly 2 results, but they might be potentially interesting what to do about warts. So if I wanted to look at the PDF full text, there it is. Several steps may help speed their departure. And then I can read about different types of treatments. And there's duct tape. Yes, it's true. Duct tape works. I'm going to close this tab. And I'm actually going to go into another medical database that's called Medline. And this is actually created by the U.S. National Library of Medicine. Something we're going to be going over in future weeks will be identifying credible sources of information. And I will often look to see who actually provides a specific database. It is provided by a government agency or by an association that's very well known in that field. Let's do duct tape and word removal again. Again, that's my search statement. Okay, got one here. But I could also change my search. I'm going to use or here. Remember, I put my parentheses. Let's do wart or warts. So this is why it's a good idea to have more than one search statement, because the first one may not work. That was a lot better. Isn't that interesting? I just modified that a little bit. Treating warts, is duct tape the answer? Duct tape for the treatment of common warts in adults, a double-blind randomized controlled trial. Now I'm starting to get into some more scientific and professional medical journals. That's what I want if I really want to research this topic in more depth and more detail. So that's the scope, figuring out what it is that you need and then narrowing that down to the most appropriate resources or subject-specific databases. So I've done pretty well here. We're going to have one more tutorial that's going to show you the engagement activities and the learning assessments that you may choose to do for this week. Again, keep in mind that with our specifications grading that we are using, you can choose which learning assessments and engagement activities that you would want to complete depending upon the grade that you're going for. We are always available to answer any questions, and so at this point, you'll be ready to move on to our third tutorial about the engagement activities and the learning assessments.